Hey everyone, this is Teagan Hines. For those of you that are new, welcome. I am a writer for the Pentucket Profile, which is an online newspaper. And for those of you that are not new, that have been here before and following along with my writing, welcome back. Today we are doing a podcast form of my continued series, The Substance Movie Review. Today we're going to be discussing Sue and her experience of the substance. So, just quick before we get into everything today, for those of you that have not yet seen the substance or have not yet read my articles, I kindly suggest that you go refer to my first article. It'll give you a lot more context, the characters, the plot, everything you need to know before you get up until this point. And if you've not seen the movie, don't worry. I explain all the basic plot stuff in depth, so you're all good on that. And then just a slight trigger warning for anyone who has a queasy or sensitive stomach. This is a gory body horror comedy. So if you're not comfortable with that, not good with blood, needles, anything or like that, or even just talking about it, I suggest you go check out my Gossip Girl article. Much more tame. So without further ado, let's go. So without further ado, here is The Substance, Sue's Experience. So, from where we last left off, Elizabeth, our main character, had just transformed into the body of Sue. Now, this whole transformation process is so crazy to me because there's just so much going on. Essentially, what happens is Sue gets born from Elizabeth, but they are still the same person. So now we see Sue as Margaret Qualley, and she's standing up. She's in this new body. She doesn't realize what's happening at first. Elizabeth's kind of just like laying there on the corner. She's not dead. She's in her sleep, I guess, because if you remember, they each have 7 days where they get to spend their time however they choose, but only 7 days. So now Elizabeth is discovering herself as Sue, and she walks over to the mirror and she unwipes the fog on the mirror and she sees herself as Margaret Qualley, great, great actress, and she realizes that the substance has in fact worked. She's younger, she's more beautiful, she's more perfect, and she's just kind of inspecting everything and looking at herself. She's kind of just like in awe of everything, right? Because at first Elizabeth doesn't believe this is real. She's like, okay, this is another one of those like skinny teas or like tummy tuck teas. It's just not real. It's a scam. But now that it actually has worked and she has transformed into Sue, the other version of Elizabeth, this is crazy. So 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 here is Sue just checking everything out, kind of just like a newborn baby. She's just getting used to her surroundings and stuff. And then the camera zooms in and we get an in-depth view of her eye, which is ironically Elizabeth's eyes are green, Sue's are blue. And we have like a mixture of green and blue eyes, which shows that like when you look closely, you do still see Elizabeth in Sue because obviously, they're one person. But it's just this whole scene was so gory and gut-wrenching, but I feel like it accurately portrayed all the emotions Elizabeth was feeling. And then, when the close-up of her eye comes in again, the green illuminates underneath the blue iris, which shows this is Elizabeth. They're one person. And of course, after she's done checking herself out and stuff and getting used to her body, we get a bunch of close-ups, which I think were kind of unnecessary, but it all just goes to show like just how much she values her body and herself and the way that she looks. And Elizabeth Moles, are still there, which shows she's still Elizabeth, she's just a younger version. So now, once she's done, like, super happy about her body and the transformation, she has to go back and stitch herself up. Mind you, Elizabeth is laying on the floor still. All right. And then as soon as Sue sees this, she just like throws up. This is like disgusting, which is so ironic, right? Because you think like you're seeing two different people, but it's one person. And that's the whole trick of this movie. It's one person, two different bodies. So she has to go and stitch Elizabeth up. And this is where I think it like the mother-daughter thing kind of comes into play. Like you see like a younger girl taking care of an older woman. So she then stitches her up, but just oh my, it's incredibly gory. Like you just get a completely in-depth Elizabeth's body, and it's just honestly, quite frankly, it's disgusting. But that's the whole point, right? This is not some rom-com that is gonna make you feel good. This is like gut-wrenching, raw. This is the whole point, to make you sick to your stomach, like the things that women will do to make beautiful. That's the whole point. So we go through this entire scene of just her stitching Elizabeth back up, as she literally came out of her back, which is a disgusting scene in and of itself. So once she's done stitching Elizabeth up, um, she- right, because that's how this works. And then once Sue was done feeding Elizabeth, she just kind of sits there for a while. I think just kind of taking everything in, right? Because this is still the very beginning of this entire movie. And she's still kind of accepting what's happened. One theory that I had come up with was the fact that Elizabeth and Sue they never changed at all. Like they never switched. There was no Sue in physical terms. Like Elizabeth is mentally ill. She probably has DID, dissociative identity disorder, or borderline personality disorder that has caused her to envision herself as Sue so much so that she becomes her. Um, which is an interesting aspect, and it would not shock me at all if she did actually have that, because of all the abuse and exploitation she faced from Hollywood all these years. It doesn't shock me in the slightest if Elizabeth is actually really, truly just mentally ill. So now we get an upward angle of Sue's first night as Sue. And then the scene immediately cuts to her taking a shower. But instead of the shower scene that we saw earlier with Elizabeth, it was dull, it was sad, it was gray. It's completely different. She's like just relishing in the fact she's younger and she's beautiful. She it's just like her once her body changed, her whole mindset changed. And that is like the craziest thing, not even the craziest thing about this film, but the fact that like all it takes was for her to be in a different body to feel so differently is just what just gets me every single time. So yeah, shower scene obviously over sexualized for obvious reasons. Meanwhile, Sue's in the shower enjoying herself, and Elizabeth's just kind of like standing there, not standing there, but like while Sue's in the shower, like enjoying herself, relishing in her newfound body, Elizabeth's just like lying on the ground, stitched up, probably with an infection. It's kind of like kind of amusing, but also like the ignorance immediately. Like she just has no respect for herself, like her current self, like her old self, like not old self, but older self, like Elizabeth. She just has no respect for her, and you'll see that get worse later in the film. But it's just like she's completely abandons her. She doesn't clothe her. She doesn't like move her at all. She just leaves her there, which is just like oh my god, it's insane. But yeah, We see we see a very long shower scene, obviously making all of the points about Sue's body that this movie wants to, but not even like the movie that just Sue herself wants to make. And then, she gets out, she gets dressed, she gets in, her robe. But as soon as she gets in her robe, she starts to not feel well. She starts getting a nosebleed, her ear starts bleeding. She realizes she has to use a stabilizer. So she opens up the stabilizer and then she has to stabilize herself, which means she basically has to kind of like an injection, stab it into her thigh, essentially. So so Sue has to stabilize herself, right, to stay Sue and healthy and be able to function. So not only does she has to stabilize herself, but she also has to stabilize her matrix self. And basically what she does is she goes in and she has to take a substance. It's not blood because it's clear, but a substance from her Elizabeth and then inject it into herself, basically to maintain her beauty, her youth, her stability. And then everything's great. But the second that she forgets to stabilize herself, or, the second she forgets to stabilize herself, everything begins to come undone. Her ear starts bleeding, her nose starts bleeding. Like, that's just what we see, the first time. But, like, what happens when she starts to get greedy and forgets to stabilize herself? It's just the substance is such a slippery slope, right? And is the concept almost feels false because how can you have two people and still be one person? How, like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And it's like I think the concept is just how the whole concept to me kind of seems like how far people are willing to go to maintain their beauty, to stay thin, to be the version of themselves that everyone knows and loves. And I think the people who invented the substance kind of did it as like a social experiment. I mean, this whole film was a social experiment in and of itself. But I think the makers of the substance and how like what like how I think the makers of the substance and how they are like always like you are one. Follow the instructions. It just feels like one big social experiment. It just feels like one. So then the first thing that Sue does as herself once she's got all her affairs in order is she just starts stretching. Like laying in her living room stretching. Breathing in the air like just like her whole life feels like a breath of fresh air and then she sees a casting call. She just threw in the trash can. And then she steps out and into the street and the sun is shining, everything's bright and glossy and gleamy. It's not like darkness with the sunlight. Like when Elizabeth was, out and she was wearing her sunglasses, hiding herself, it felt like an eclipse, like a solar eclipse, like the moon was in front of the sun. But now that the moon's not there and the sun's just there, it's just completely different. And Sue wears Elizabeth's jacket, no sunglasses, obviously. She's walking down Hollywood. She's walking Sue's walking down the sidewalk and she spots a leotard in the window. A pink metallic leotard. And she's perplexed by it. She looks at it and she just kind of like smiles. And then obviously it cuts to a transition of two men sitting at a table with a camera. They're watching a woman dance. Obviously an audition for what we can infer is the casting call. and we never see the woman's face who's auditioning, but that's the whole point. They don't view her as a person, as a woman. They're looking at this woman like she's a piece of meat. They're looking at her right now like she's a prey. And that's like the disgusting side to the producers and the directors and all of the men that take advantage of women in Hollywood. It's just all really, really disgusting. Like how they view women as prey. It's so gross. So, anyways, so the two producers or casting directors who are having the woman come audition just kind of say, thanks, we'll let you know by next week. And she's obviously, dying to get the part, worked really hard. As soon as she leaves the room, they start critiquing her body. They say, oh, as soon as she leaves the room, they start critiquing her body. They're like, oh, she's a great dancer. And then they go make some like sexual comment about her that I don't even want to repeat. But it's just, oh my God. So we see the two casting directors um judging the woman and her entire audition. We can assume that this is the casting call that Sue's going to, right? So as soon as the woman is done performing, she leaves. We don't ever see her face, but there's a reason for that, right? As soon as the woman is done with her audition, she leaves. As soon as the woman leaves her audition, she's all done. The casting directors, they're just indifferent from her audition. Like, they're like, oh, she's a great dancer, but then they go make some sexual comment about her body and like complain about it. And that's the reason why ultimately they don't end up casting her. Okay. So this kind of alludes to the fact that casting directors, producers, directors, really, they're not really looking for talent. Really, what they're looking for is, can this person, specifically woman, can she be marketed as a sex symbol? Can she be like the next heartthrob for generations? Like can't but like not beyond heartthrob, can she be a sex symbol? Um and it's really quite a taboo topic that's not talked about, and understandably, like this is just like deplorable stuff you're seeing about women and how women are treated. Um but ultimately it's necessary that we talk about these things so boys and young men who grow up to become producers and casting directors know that this kind of behavior and this kind of treatment of women is not okay. But it's a cycle. This entire industry is a cycle of corruption. This entire industry is a cycle of corruption, which is why Hollywood still is the way it is. So, as soon as the other girl leaves, Sue comes in, and their reaction to Sue, the producer, casting director's reaction to Sue compared to the other girl is just, oh my God, it's so different. First of all, we don't really see Sue's face. We see her behind, and we see the two men just above, like her hip. It's just clear it's just it's made very clear what is being judged here, what is being focused on. Okay, she's in the metallic pink leotard she saw in the shopping window, and she doesn't even she does not Sue doesn't even perform her audition, and she's casted. So the men go make a terrible comment that I'm not even gonna comment. Like half the stuff the men say in this movie, I can't even repeat because it's just so disgusting. So then we have like an intense song start playing, and we get like a 360 of Sue. She's in like 80s style athletic wear. It's very tight, very revealing and stuff. She's got these little star earrings. She's got her hair in a ponytail, lip gloss, and then she says her infamous line, "I'm Sue." And then the line glitches and plays back and forth and back and forth. And we see eventually that this is being played on a TV screen inside what looks like a bachelor pad, like office thing. And then the camera, we see Sue standing behind her TV playing, and then the camera pans, and then we see Harvey, the manager, Elizabeth's manager, yelling, "Where is she? Where is she? Where'd she go?" So Harvey starts yelling for Sue, and the second he sees Sue, and he sees how beautiful she is, and he sees how she's everything he wants her to be, he's completely overwhelmed with joy and happiness. And it's disgusting. And he's got his little three henchmen standing behind him, right? Which kind of shows how men need other men to feel confident and powerful because by themselves they don't have that same power. But it's really deplorable how Harvey looks at Sue. I mean, this is just like, it's disgusting in general how society looks at women, specifically young women and old women in Hollywood. But hey everyone, my name is Teagan Hines. For the Hey everyone, this is Teagan Hines. For those of you for Hey everyone, this is Teagan Hines. Hey everyone, this is Teagan Hines. Okay, folks, that's all the time we have for today. So I do hope you have enjoyed this brief but also in-depth review of part of Sue's experience in the substance. It's been fantastic reviewing the substance, this movie, and we're still not done. We've still got ways to go. But I hope you guys have enjoyed today's session, and thank you for tuning in. Bye.